Welcome back to Enka and welcome back to another movie review.
Woo!
Today we have the one and only It Lives Inside. Mm-hmm. We watched this movie back in October, I think. The beginning of
Early
October.
October, yep.
Yeah. And we were between this one and a different horror movie, but we really thought that this one was going to be like the hit and that it was going to be... It looked scary. Mm-hmm. So we decided to start the spooky season with some action horror. We actually went out and saw this movie with my mom because she's a horror fan. And I mean, we can just get right into it.
We saw this with her?
I thought we did.
Why do I not remember her being there?
I thought we did. Yeah, it definitely did. Because then we were talking about that right after.
Oh.
And even my sister came, I think.
Anyways. It Lives Inside. This movie came out on September 22nd. It's by a production company distributed by Neon, which is the first Neon movie we've ever seen.
And then didn't we watch another Neon movie right after? Or at least a couple of trailers we saw.
Yeah. There was a couple of trailers for other Neon distributed films. But yeah, I've never heard of Neon before. So we might need to do a deep dive into Neon because they could be another A24.
Yeah, correct.
Related thing.
What's it called? Blumhouse?
Yeah, something like that. But anyways, it was directed, I'm so sorry, I'm going to butcher everybody's names, but it was directed by Bishal Dutta, and at the box office, it earned about $6.4 million. So not much at the box office, but I'm not also
doesn't
surprised.
feel like the budget was huge. Do you know what the budget is?
I don't know what the budget was off the top of this, but I'm not surprised it didn't get a lot of money because I can't say I saw a lot of hype for it.
Definitely
so that's another reason why I'm glad we're talking about this today. It doesn't have the best audience reviews on Google. 2.5 stars is the average. A lot of them being 1 stars. And I don't quite know off the top of my head why, but I guess we'll get into
why
that.
A bunch of them are 1 stars?
Yeah. Yeah, but the premise of the movie is, desperate to fit in at school, Sam rejects her East Indian culture and family to be like everyone else. However, when a mythological demonic spirit latches onto her former best friend, she must come to terms with her heritage to defeat it.
Okay, so this movie, the reason why I was saying at the beginning that we thought it was going to be the scary movie that was presenting at the time is because the trailer really put it as I don't know, if you know of Indian culture, you know that there is a lot of actual really scary demons and really scary mythological creatures and whatnot, or religious creatures. So in my head, I was like, this is going to go actually really deep into those religious moments and just how deep rooted they are in the culture. Well, a little bit, not quite. It was more like any other demon that you could find in a book. And me personally, the movie was alright. I don't think the movie was super scary. Definitely had a couple good jump scares, a couple good tense moments. But not at any point I was super, super scared. And I just really expected more out of the subject matter itself. And I just didn't feel like I got that.
Yeah, I saw one of the movie reviews was saying that the monster reminded them of the Babadook.
I haven't seen that movie.
We have seen these kind of creatures that feed off your loneliness before.
Yeah.
I did really like the tie-in to actual mythology and actual culture that was in the movie. But I agree, the actual scariness of it. I felt like I was more scared of Insidious, overall.
Yeah.
And that one, you could have your own criticisms of that one, but that one in general made me feel more fear than this one, because I just feel like maybe there was so much plot in it. At times it really deviated from the horror elements, because the basis of this story is this girl who's basically turning her back from a culture that she's born into, that her parents are a part of, and she's trying to just be a part of this in crowd at her majority white school. And so I fell more into the plot of that and wanted to know more about that journey. It felt more like a drama at times, I feel like, because of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Than horror.
And like the loss of friendship and growing up together. And then like just the fact that the other kid was like so straight up not okay. And people weren't like really addressing that. They were just like, oh, she's a little lonely and whatnot. No, like you can tell that the other kid was in distress, going through something really, really bad. And I think no one was actually like paying attention to that because it was so easy to see. It's not like you blink and you miss it.
Yeah.
And the same thing started happening to our main character. And I think it's not super realistic in that sense. Like people actually notice that right away.
Especially when a person is carrying around a jar.
Yeah.
No one does that. It's not illegal, but no one does it. Like,
it's like one of those things that are not
strange.
illegal, but like why? Why are you doing that?
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm kind of indifferent. I liked the cultural stuff, but I liked more of the character arcs than the horror.
So
and that's where I felt
this is the
down.
first, I think this might have been actually the first horror movie we watched in October. And that actually, if you've been following the podcast, we watched a lot of horror movies in October.
Too many
horror movies in October. To the point that I forgot about this movie. Like I just, it didn't stay in my mind. It wasn't memorable. There were a couple others that are most definitely memorable, like Smile and whatnot.
Yeah.
And Hell House still lives inside of me. But this movie specifically, it was not memorable. And it wasn't like, I wouldn't really tell someone, a horror fan or someone that's trying to get into horror, go watch that movie and then you get a good scare. I wouldn't really do that.
That's true. Yeah. I don't think I'd actually recommend this as a horror movie at all.
Wouldn't. Maybe more like a junior horror, if you will.
Soft horror.
Yeah. Like if you don't really want to get scared, but you still want to get a little, maybe for like a 10-year-old.
Spookiness.
I mean, don't show this movie to a 10-year-old, but it's like the vibe. The vibe that I'm getting.
Shall we go into some reviews?
Let's do it.
Okay. So, the first review I have is from The Hollywood Reporter. And the title of it says, a horror debut about first-generation immigrant falls short of its potential. Goes on to say, It Lives Inside chronicles Sam's attempt to find her friend. She embarks on a frantic search for clues, asking her mother vague questions and pulling from her patchy memory. The film grips us with its jump scares and Wesley Hughes' propulsive score. The stakes are high and we believe them at first. Somewhere along Sam's journey, though, the spell breaks. Dutta's film slackens as it takes increasingly conventional routes and deserts the bolder promises of its premise. Immigrant dislocation, the notion of being stuck between worlds, and the idea of America as a land of opportunity are explored in what feels like a cursory manner. Vague dialogue full of broad sentiments makes the characters feel more like symbols than people. Further details about Sam and Tamira's friendships or scenes between Sam and her mother, who figures more prominently the closer her daughter gets to solving the mystery, would have lent crucial scenes more texture. Indeed, that specificity could have also propped up the film's horror elements. Distance from the characters means that It Lives Inside doesn't always deliver on fright. Some of the scariest parts of the film take place in the first act, just as we are getting to know Sam and Tamira. Understanding their shared past, sensing the severance, and acknowledging that both teenagers still feel alienated adds a haunting layer to the film. When Dutta moves away from focusing on the friendship, shifting gears to explore an underdeveloped love story, for example, it divides our attention and weakens the narrative. The potency of It Lives Inside and why it might be worth checking out, even if it isn't wholly satisfying, lies in how it introduces Sam and Tamira's relationship and links it to Hindu lore. That connection is refreshingly bold, and from it emerge far more interesting questions about the violent isolation of assimilation.
I mean, what they were saying about this it being scary in the first half, I think the first half was definitely scarier. The second half was more intense. With the mom trying to join in forces and trying to actually fight this demon. But at the same time that it became more intense, it also became more melodramatic. It was more about her relationship with her mom and how the mom just wasn't being it and wasn't being supportive or whatever it is.
Right.
So it became more of a drama in that sense. But at the same time, there were more intense moments, like both of them trying to fight together, the demon or the dad coming in, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And that was like super interesting, but I can't say that I felt scared. It felt like an action movie, honestly, in those like last final moments. And then especially like with her trying to save Tamira, you're not like fully scared for her. You're just watching her defeat this monster.
Exactly. It's still intense, but not scary.
Exactly. So it kind of goes back and forth on the horror elements.
And then to the aspect of it being a story of like trying to fit in as an immigrant. I mean, as an immigrant myself, I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, obviously it's not my culture. I'm Hispanic, not Indian, but it just, I don't know that it's the best horror film that tries to depict an outsider perspective. Because I feel like it really could have been anything. It didn't have anything specific that said this is a story about this specific culture. Because if you describe the whole plot and everything without saying that it was Indian, it could literally be any culture. Like it could be any demon. It could also be any race. It could be any age even, I think. It could be the same story but in college. So I don't think there was anything specific about the movie and the way they made it that is so intricate and specific to a single culture or specifically to the message that they were trying to convey. It was a bit ambiguous in that sense. So I will definitely try to like deepen the roots of religion and culture and more of how that affects it, because if anything, the only actually fully religious thing that they were talking about was the celebration that the whole family was coming to see, and the importance of the dress and whatnot and being dressed up for it. But other than that, that wasn't really that important. It was more like, oh, the parents are missing or like something like that, I remember. But there wasn't anything that actually would make it stick that this is specifically for these kind of people. It's not like that you're trying to send a message to anybody. That's what I'm saying.
So you wish that there was more like specificity?
Yeah, I just wish there was more something that calls out for that culture.
Right.
That really shows the importance of these stories being specifically about the Indian culture.
Yeah.
And that shows respect. I mean, I'm sure they did a lot of research and probably the people that directed it or something like that are actually Indian. But I feel like sometimes filmmakers of color get really scared of putting too much into one film because they feel like they don't want to be super targeting a single specific culture, or they want to have bigger opportunities for more audiences. But that's when you fall short as a filmmaker. I feel like you really need to show in your films and your movies what your whole culture is about. Like what I did with the People film, I didn't try to cut short on the immigration story, and many immigrants have actually told me how in reality it is much worse, and people don't really know that, and you still watch it to this day and you're like, that seems a little over the top, but it really isn't. So I feel like there could be something done with that in this movie that it seems a little over the top, but in reality is just how Indians live their life in America or something like that.
Yeah, I think horror as like a genre is known as like kind of one of like the easier genres to make. So I understand why as like a first like debut, you might be more inclined to do more like the horror stuff, so that you don't have to create more of like a full world building or adding in all this extra research that could help the characters be more relatable. But yeah, like I definitely get what you're saying about how you just wish that more people of color specifically in their films went that extra mile, took that extra mile.
Because even then, even the horror didn't fully stick for the same reason. Because the horror and the demon was so specific to this culture.
Yeah.
But it wasn't shown why or how.
Yeah. If it just went a little deeper.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to look at someone that makes really great horrors that are really specific to a culture, you can look at Jordan Peele. Makes really good films that really speak to the Black American person. And you can really get scared with those movies as well.
Yeah. This next review actually kind of talks about that a little bit more. I think this is also from Rolling Stone. Okay, no, the other one was Hollywood Reporter. This is from Rolling Stone, and they were talking about how it's more of a metaphor than a horror movie, and that they specifically said that it could have used a less heavy-handed approach. So it goes on to say, there's a second and slightly more pressing question at the heart of It Lives Inside, however, and that is this a horror movie that's supporting a metaphor or the other way around? Writer-director Bishal Datta's feature debut may understand the genre's vocabulary and know how to make good use of shadows, shower curtains, and a few old-school Val Lewton tricks. But in the post-social horror, post-A24 world in which we now live, a certain balance is required when you're minding the fertile ground of creep shows doubling as either commentary or chow for thought. And while the idea of using a supernatural scary movie as a starting point for exploring the second-generation immigrant experience, or say how diasporas can be both nurturing and confining, why attempts at assimilation may come with an unsolicited side of self-loathing, and the idea that the old world can provide foundational things that the new world can't, is rife with possibilities. The end result here doesn't necessarily make good on the promise of that premise. There's a sense that the symbolic nature of this endeavor and its attempt to unnerve, unsettle, and occasionally unleash a shriek out of you aren't quite synced up. It Lives Inside knows you can use the cover of monsters and things that go bump in the night in your psyche to examine the real-life horrors. But when the message starts to eclipse the medium, it's time to get out.
So they really like that. Kind of, sort of.
Sort of.
Like, they I see where they're coming from.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a little complicated, I guess, but it's more just saying, like, you're, like, the balance between wanting to show
too disproportionate.
The immigrant experience and then wanting the horror. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't fully there. So that made it so that the scary parts weren't really as scary, and the plot, you just...
wasn't dramatic
enough.
Yeah.
And that's hard. That's so hard.
It didn't really know what way it was going. Mm-hmm. I mean, I am sad that that's the case, because all in all, I feel like the movie, let's completely forget about Blumhouse and big studio houses that make horror. Let's specifically focus on Neon and as an independent production house and just independent filmmakers as a whole. Mm-hmm. I think it's really well done for independent filmmaking. Yeah. And the movie has beautiful picture, and I think the story itself has a good base, a good starting point that if it were to be developed a little bit more in both senses, it could really hit it off. Probably with a small budget, I think the monster itself was really well done as well. And it's just sad that it didn't hit as hard as it could have. Yeah. Because I think there were a really big amount of good ideas that could have made this. Potentially, that it could have been one of those cases where there's so many good ideas that you don't really know what to put in. The end result, you're just kind of left with like a mediocre feeling. Yeah. Yeah. Because I remember leaving the theater and a lot of people were saying like, oh, that was it. Okay. Yeah. It just felt mediocre at the end, and I think that this had so much promise to it with the plot. I mean, we picked it over. I don't remember what other film was going on at the time. Picked it over plenty of other films. I just don't remember. But it was another big house making a horror film, and we picked it over that one, because yes, the premise itself and what it said it would be was so promising. Yeah, I was so excited for it, and it looked so scary. Yeah, it really did. In the trailers, I was going into it like expecting to be really scary. Oh yeah, because I was like, they're not playing around. I think for a first debut, I still think this is really promising. I agree, and it makes me want to follow this director's career a little bit, because I'm wondering if this director is gonna go more with horror and try to make other films potentially also related to East Indian culture, or if he's gonna go more dramatic. Yeah, I'm like very curious on which side you want to go, because I do think this is pretty promising. Yeah. I just hope that there's a balance in the future films. I agree. Do you have any other reviews, or is that it? That's it. Well, with that being said, we're gonna keep following what's gonna happen with Neon Productions and with the director itself, because we are really interested. Again, we're kind of sad that it wasn't as big of a success as it could have been. But it's still a good movie. Yeah. Really want to watch it again. If you want to watch it, I will definitely say take the time and do it. But if you're going for a really good spook, there's other movies that you can definitely check out. And we've reviewed a couple of them if you want. I would go in wanting to see the
the lore and the mythology again, more than the scares.
For sure.
Definitely.
How many clapping boards out of 5 would you give it?
I'd give it a 3 for that reason.
Okay. I'll give it a 2.5.
Okay.
I feel really in the middle with the movie. Yeah. Well, with that being said, thank you so much for being here one more week with us. You can follow us at NCOT the podcast on Instagram. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find us as NCOT ! At the end. On all podcast platforms. If you're listening right now on one of those platforms, you can find us on YouTube as That Film Couple. And you can find us with that same exact handle, That Film Couple, on TikTok. And lastly, you can follow me on Instagram as sebi.mp4.
And you can follow me at caitlin.mp4.
Thank you for being here one more week. And we'll see you in the next one. And cut!